Welcome to Center Stage, everybody. I'm Rajiv, your host, and today I'm very excited to have Ajit Deshpande from Salesforce, Vice President of Marketing, Business Planning, and Analytics. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So you've been at Salesforce for over 5 years,
Yep.
and I'm sure you've had an incredible journey while you've been there.
Yep.
And during that entire duration, you've been in the marketing, business, and planning side of it.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your journey over the 5 years, and from starting as a director, I believe, to your career path and progression to where you are today.
It has been 5 years, and I think time really flies, for sure. Salesforce is a growth-oriented company, 20+% growth every year, and so on. When I came to Salesforce, I had actually at the time basically no experience with marketing, no experience with ops, no experience with SaaS.
Really?
Wow. And really, I was at the time in venture capital, and the goal for me was really to understand marketing as a little bit of an unsolved problem, and to see if I could use my first principles mindset to solve it. And in 5 years, it's been a journey which started with just business planning, and then I got into analytics and data science and some of these other aspects. So it's been great, lots of learning.
Tell me a little bit more about first principles mindset. What do you mean by that?
When we talk about first principles, really, marketing is a little bit of a gray science. It's an art, a little bit. In many ways, the goal for marketing is to help sales, but also there is a different avenue to it. There is the avenue of the long-term health of the brand, the long-term health of the broader business, the happiness of the customer, and things of that sort.
Sure.
And marketing has to go across all of those things and straddle it. So when you think of it that way, marketing is the one business function in the company that is pulled in many different directions, and it has to sort of attribute its success and vouch for its success and publicize its success with a lot of these disparate functions.
Right.
A typical marketing-focused mindset doesn't really cater to all of these different personas, right? So a first principles mindset then basically says, if I have a objective from a corporate lens, how do I achieve that objective through all of these channels, marketing being one of them, but through sales, through sort of brand development, through awareness, through customer success, through all of these channels.
Right.
And people like me, for example, who would have approached marketing with that lens, through that first principle mindset, can actually be very objective and can be sort of unconstrained by dogma in trying to make a difference. So going back to sort of my journey at Salesforce, the business planning piece for me really, in some ways it's a math problem, in some ways it's a problem where I'm trying to sort of ride that roller coaster on what matters to the company at a given point in time for a period of sort of for a time frame, whether it's the short term or the long term and so on, and try to optimize off of that.
Got it. Yeah, makes sense. I tend to think of marketing as a central hub in a company where your clients internally are sales, customer success, and product.
Right.
And those are the sort of the three constituents that you're trying to work with.
Absolutely.
Let's take it back to math and sales.
Yeah.
Talk to me about pipeline and forecasting.
Right.
How do you think about that in terms of forecasting and generating pipeline and demand gen to support sales?
That's a great question. So it's been an evolutionary thought process for us. There was a period of time back, I guess probably 3 years ago, when if you were to ask marketing what their only objective was, it was pipeline, right? And I think it is pretty easy to get caught up into that objective as the only thing that marketing delivers. You say sales is your key customer and so on, and that's great. But over time, the evolution for us, when we think of pipeline and forecasting and measurement, etc., I think we've actually developed this pillar approach to how marketing should be measuring its success. Pipe gen is a key pillar, but we think of it as 5 pillars really.
Okay.
The first pillar is awareness. The second pillar is pipe gen. The third pillar is pipe maturation, which is helping close deals. The fourth pillar is sales enablement. And then the fifth pillar is adoption, which is, in our case, post-sale retention. Right?
Customer
Keep
success.
customer success, keeping the customer happy. Not all these pillars are owned necessarily by the CMO, especially the customer success side is very heavily driven by the other teams. But our goal when we think of pipeline and forecasting, etc., the pipe gen and the pipe maturation pillars for us, we are very scientific about those pillars. So we have targets that come from corporate as far as overall pipeline. Within Salesforce, all pipeline is owned by sales in that sense. So there is a first touch thought process to how sales does their pipeline. But marketing is an overlay, which means marketing is responsible for influencing all deals that are created by sales in that sense, right? And so there are targets for pipeline, there are targets for ACV or new revenue within Salesforce, and we correspondingly take those targets and we create a overlay marketing contribution to the pipe gen as an objective for us. And so we have that at the same level of detail that corporate would have, which means by sales leader, by region, by product, by industry, by segment, and so on. So we create, first of all, we create those targets. We have similar objectives from a growth perspective on the pipe maturation side. Pipe maturation is really open pipeline that we are touching to help accelerate and grow the deals, right? So for those things, we are very scientific. We have an objective, and then we look at how much money we have to invest in order to achieve those objectives. And then we have a sense of whether we are well staffed and well funded to achieve those. And where we are not, we will look to, lobby for additional resources,
more budget,
etc., more budget, and or optimize as appropriate. So there's that piece which is super important for us on the pipe gen and pipe maturation side. On the awareness side, that is less tangible. That is the piece that we have more actively tried to build upon in the last couple of years as an organization. That is not tangible as much. However, we do brand studies to understand unaided and aided awareness for Salesforce, for our products. Now, almost quarterly at this point in time. And then we also use a lot of additional metrics, whether it's a reach of our paid and inbound channels, whether it's website traffic, earned media, etc. We've been looking to quantify all of those to connect. So when you think of sort of that whole piece, we are actually looking at each pillar independently. So it's not a journey as much as we would like it to be, right? So awareness for a person does not result in that person then becoming pipeline the next quarter, right? It's a group of people that you make aware of Salesforce, and they may show up later, and then pipeline doesn't result in pipe maturation and so on. So every pillar matters to us independently, and our goal is to have all pillars have either attainment to a target or growth on an objective. So if the company is growing 20, 25, 30% in revenue every year, in theory, all of these pillars should grow at the same rate, right? So that's what we do. And since we have the targets, every week, every month, we can track attainment on those targets. We are very tied with sales on what their pipeline looks like, what our attainment against our objectives from an overlay perspective are, and where the mismatch is, and our goal is to optimize the resources to feed them. The forecast piece is a little bit of a softer aspect, right? Forecasts, so we have targets, but forecasts are more driven by sales' understanding of what they can achieve, right? So if sales can expect to create pipeline based on the seasonality of the business, competition and whatnot, our goal is to try to match their objectives. So we are a little bit more tight on that front. Support and sort of, we think of it as just a collaboration where we partner with them to run programs all together.
In essence, the 5 pillars you mentioned is sort of the traditional sort of funnel metrics. You think about MQL, SQL, close one, post, but you're customizing it into the silos, so it's a little bit different. But when you're talking about that, that's what sort of came to mind.
Well, so yes and no. In a in a typical company, you'd be exactly right, right? The thing with Salesforce though is we, in certain industries and certain markets, we are saturated, which means we are the dominant player.
Right.
When it comes to sales, CRM, etc. Small business was our bread and butter. So there are areas, industries in high tech, professional services, etc., where we are sort of the de facto product to be used. So we don't necessarily get new logos all the time in certain areas. Obviously, certain industries for us are open, and that's where a typical funnel flow would work. You get a marketing qualified lead, and it becomes a little bit of a valid lead, and you create an opportunity. But for us, the add-on part of the business is extremely important. Using the entire portfolio of Salesforce products to be more digitally engaged with our customers is also important, which then means that we have to be very influence focused also. And influence is a harder thing to measure, right? And so when we think of it that way, these pillars they sort of mesh into each other a little bit, and it doesn't really become a funnel. So like sales enablement, for example, we just have 27 products at this point in time, if you think about it, or more. And sales itself needs to understand how these products interplay. Right. That is something that we are responsible for doing, and it may not result in immediate tangible benefits there either.
Right.
Portions of it we could measure, but large swaths of it are more hazy in nature.
Got it.
So yeah.
So that let's talk about a little bit about predictive modeling. And predictive analytics, and how you leverage that data. For example, it can be effective to identify customers that may churn, or propensity models as it relates to share of wallet.
Yes.
So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yes, that's a great question. So I talked about these 5 pillars as far as objectives, right? But then when we think of marketing analytics or marketing data science, etc., we look at it a little bit through also a horizontal framework. So there's this sort of famous paradigm, which is the descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, and prescriptive analytics paradigm, right? Which is sort of a continuum where descriptive is where you say this is going on. Diagnostic is you're saying this is why it's going on. Predictive is you're saying this is what will happen or might happen. And then prescriptive is this is what you should do, right? And if you got to the holy grail of prescriptive marketing, it will be one click, and every marketer would know on a Monday morning what exactly they have to do,
right.
And then they don't have to use their brains, right? Like that's the holy grail. It will never happen, but that's the transition. And when you think of it that way, our goal is to keep moving to the right, always. Our goal is to automate out of reporting aspects, to have data available in a self-serve fashion, so that we don't have to spend our time pulling reports and joining things and all that. Even though that's a lot of what a lot of folks do within our teams. But our goal is to automate that, move to the right, then do trended insights, move us to the right a little bit. And then on the predictive and prescriptive side, it's all data models, right? It's all about Blackbox AI. So within Salesforce, not specifically just within marketing, but within Salesforce, there's a lot of different such initiatives that exist around AI. The earliest one, which is also our probably most tenured and robust implementation, was around customer retention, which was to understand based on usage patterns, etc., on customers that could be at risk of churn. And that was an internal model that was built based on app logs and so on, that the company uses very actively. There is a similar piece on the product side where we are looking at feature usage and things of that sort. And then on sort of my side, we have a marketing data science focus where really the key things that we do are a couple of questions that we try to answer. Number one is, what is the next best action for a given prospect or contact or account that marketing should take? And then the second one is, what is the right audience for a given activity that marketing is doing. Right?
Okay.
So like those are the two broad sets of questions that we are looking to answer. Examples of what we've been doing are we have what we internally call prospect account intelligence, which is around scoring prospect accounts based on any signals that we have, which would be a combination of their account attributes within our database, their quality of contacts for those accounts, the engagements of those contacts with marketing and sales, and then also some additional third-party information on how these accounts might be surging on certain areas of interest or intent, right?
Okay.
So we get all of that information and we create this scoring model where we rate prospects going from 0 to 5, the 5 being ones where we think they are very ready to buy Salesforce and will convert, and the zeros being either bad data or just sort of zero interest and things of that sort. And we use that to then feed our outbound business development reps to make the right phone calls and for marketing to do the right new logo campaigns, etc. on those. Then for customers, we have a similar model which is far more usage-based, which means once you're a customer, what is the next best product that they might buy?
Sure.
Right?
So.
And who are the right people that might be the sponsors for those next best products? And off of that, how should an account exec set up their engagements with the customer to sell them the right thing?
The right people being the decision makers.
Correct. Right? So when you look at this continuum, you're looking at prospect scoring, you're looking at customer scoring, and then you're looking at customer retention, and that sort of is our underlying system to say this is how the journey happens. Within there, if you look at the account as one dimension, the more important or lower dimension there is the contact, right? Who is the decision maker? Who might be the right person to engage with, and for what? Right? So there is that layer that also goes with that piece. That's an example. Now, and when you think of this is what is the next best action on the account, or what is the next best action on the contact, and marketing does it, sales does it, customer success does it, we all do it, broadly speaking. There is the other piece, like I said, what is the next best audience for an activity? So if we are doing an event in Boston, 2,000 people call it, who are the 2,000 people that we should see in the room? Right? It could be the VP of sales somewhere, or it could be the admin in a different company. Maybe only people from Boston will come, and no one from Chicago will be there. So what is the geo-based, activity-based objective group that we want there?
Sure.
Right? And then can we recommend that group or that list to sales and say, sales, can you please go out and get these people to show up?
Sure.
Right? Or we could just target those people through online registration activities too.
Right.
So that's an example. Targeting on Facebook is an example. Understanding what's happening on the website is the third thing. So there's all these things that really the data engineering and the data consolidation piece is the key. But the overarching goal for us is still the same, which is build it such that for anything that we do, you can click a button and you get a list, and you say, this is what I want. And then whether you get it or not, that's a different story.
Sure. That's great. I love hearing this.
Yeah.
This is fascinating.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about Boston and an event, it sort of, for me, what comes to mind is a kind of account-based marketing, right? So tell me a little bit more about your approach when it comes to account-based marketing. What is your overarching strategy, and how do you measure the success of those campaigns?
So, like I said, at the aggregate level, we measure all the same metrics that any typical B2B company would measure. Account-based marketing, I think, is more of an intent paradigm, which means once you have segmented accounts or segmented contacts and segmented intent, etc., which is the foundation for all of this, the next thing is to go after them with the right tactics, right? So you have some intent to get a certain account or to go after a certain industry, etc., with a certain suite of products. The segmentation happens. The key thing from that point in time is then to have a continuous loop on what marketing action is happening, what sales action is happening, to try to get a consolidated view of that, right? And then to continue to update your portfolio of outreach tactics to optimize that piece, right? That piece is the ever evolving aspect of ABM for us. On the flip side, though, the measurement part of it, I think we have become reasonably sophisticated. And to us, I think the core of the measurement for us is this concept of lift. So we went after, or we are targeting 100 accounts with a certain campaign.
Yeah.
At the same time, a company, generally at least a B2B company or at least a company of our scale, cannot completely suppress or control the exact program that the account sees, right? We are always doing search engine marketing. That's always on. The website's always open for people to come in and do whatever, right? So you cannot completely control your activities with those target accounts. And so the concept of lift comes in, where if you said these 100 accounts are accounts in a certain segment in a certain city that we are targeting, new logos, whatever, we also create a control group that has all the same attributes, but we are not targeting through that program. Then we say, what is the lift for the program as opposed to the baseline, right?
Control group.
Both sides. Both sides get the same basics, SEM, the same website access, obviously, things of that sort. And with the control group now, we can say, for this ABM program, this gave us a 10-20% lift on the control group, and that's real. Because if the control group gave you 30% growth and this thing gave you 32% growth, then it actually hasn't mattered.
Sure.
I think that's the fallacy for a lot of marketing sort of storytelling around ABM. Is, hey, I did ABM and I got 32% growth. That may not be real, right? So that concept of lift matters. And then the other piece that actually we are also working on very actively is how many ABM programs should be run and how might they crosstalk with each other.
Okay.
Right. So you could have a new logo program, you could have a cross-sell program, you could have a retention program, you could have high touch, low touch, digital only, whatever. And for us, we at least have started with visualizing all of these target accounts and audiences and programs in a single view, so that now we can look at overlaps and so on. So like that's the other challenge for ABM in terms of measuring the crosstalk. And if we do have overlap, we can actually, at least focus on attributing it further. So the attribution, it's a very interesting problem, and I think we are on the way to doing it. As far as the actions part of it, that's where the evolution is happening. Is we are still obviously exploring the scale of ABM for a company like Salesforce. Right. Should it be 500 accounts or 1,000 accounts or 20,000 accounts, etc. And what's right and what's not right. So like the place of ABM in the grand scheme of things for marketing, that's the thing that is still evolving.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. You mentioned Blackbox AI. How have you driven innovation in AI into the latest technologies in Salesforce?
That's a great question. So Salesforce is a pretty unique company in the B2B world, more because our goal is to make the life of the salesperson better, the service person better, the marketer better, the CIO better. So any given business person, our goal is to make their life better. So we are looking at digital transformation, right? And we are probably the only company in the application layer that can connect all business personas together through a single platform. So what that also means then is we are internally customer number one for Salesforce. So if we can sell all of these things to customers, then we must be able to sell it to ourselves, right? Sure. And so my job is to look at all the products that Salesforce has for the marketing persona, and eat our own dog food or drink our own champagne, whatever you want to call it, and number one, contribute to it. Number two, find flaws in it so that we can continue to make it better all the time. The foundational layer, as we look at digital transformation and as we look at connecting all of these personas together for our customers, the foundational layer is what Salesforce calls Einstein. So Einstein is our AI initiative, which has been ongoing for about 4 or 5 years now, which really is a set of AI tools that any given customer for us can use. So what should my next meeting be? How much should I drive? who should I call, who should I talk to, whatever,
Right.
in sales and so on. Now, Einstein is in some ways owned by the Einstein product team,
Mhm.
but is in other ways also owned by all of us at Salesforce. So when I talk about prospect intelligence, right, prospect account scoring, it is very custom to Salesforce. It is based on the data that we have.
Mhm.
But portions of it will be productizable. And so portions, for example, how do you look at your CRM, contact database? How do you look at your account database? How do you look at marketing and sales engagement campaigns? And what portions of it can become AI buckets
Mhm.
that can be inserted then into Einstein and given to customers?
Okay.
Right? That is something that then becomes part of Einstein. So think of us as internally Einstein, and portions of us then become Einstein as they go further, which is why you will see that Salesforce continues to always offer better features, because really we are trying to just make our life better.
You're learning from the inside.
Exactly.
And then got it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in many ways, we are all product owners for Einstein
Mhm.
out there. And then the second piece for us more broadly is this internal initiative, which is Salesforce on Salesforce. The goal is to run our entire business on Salesforce.
Mhm.
And we do use outside vendors here and there,
Mhm.
but only if we do not have a Salesforce product that can also do it. And the biggest thing about Salesforce is it's fully customizable. So, you can take force.com, you can build a workflow on it,
Mhm.
and you could run your business. So like for example, I also manage money execution, money spent
Mhm.
within marketing. We have an internal tool called BudgetForce,
Mhm.
which really is a force.com instance, and it allows us to allocate our money top down
Mhm.
from the CMO all the way down below, constrain the money so that if someone spends $1 more, someone else has to lose $1 somewhere, right? So we don't have to work in Excel and
Right.
so on.
Right.
And then we can attribute the money. So if I'm spending money on Google,
Mhm.
what is it for?
Right.
It's for Sales Cloud, in small business, in financial services, in Chicago, etc. All of these are attributes that are on the money. So
Mhm.
now you think of ROI, you
Mhm.
think of the money side as an equal half,
Mhm.
and that's on Salesforce. And then you look at all the outcomes, and they are on Salesforce.
Mhm.
And now we're just basically taking it all together and saying
Right.
basic ROI,
Right.
10x
Spent.
spike to spend.
Exactly.
It's there.
Yeah. You can
So
see
it's all so I own the system
Yeah.
out there.
Mhm.
All the innovation that goes, I'm sort of the product owner,
Mhm.
which means even though I'm actually not a product person, I'm still actually contributing to something that gets given
For Budget Force.
within. But so that's my thing.
Yeah.
Once in a while, large customers. We have some really, really, really large customers that use Budget Force.
Mhm.
We don't sell it.
Okay.
But we give it for free.
Sure.
If someone says, "Oh, I have problems managing my marketing money,"
Right.
like here's
Sure.
here's Budget Force. It's an unmanaged piece of software. You can take it and you can build on it, do your thing.
Right.
And then once in a while, we'll reconnect with them and try to exchange ideas on how they forked it versus
Right.
how we are continuing to
Learn
develop
from it, make it better,
It's-
eventually productize it.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And this is everywhere at
Mhm.
Salesforce.
Mhm.
I'm just
I
sort
love
of
it.
one instance of it.
Yeah.
Every team
Right.
has their own stuff.
So what are some of the trends and technologies that you're seeing regarding marketing that you're really excited about in the future, and how should businesses sort of gear up for that?
That's an interesting question. I think the overarching trend in marketing is just around AI being all-pervasive, and marketing being marketing, I think, was probably the business persona that adopted AI as one of the earliest personas.
Mhm.
And so I think AI is starting to mature a lot. When you think of AI, the biggest piece to it is to have clean and usable and consistent data.
Sure.
And I think there's a lot of work that's going on in the B2B data side of marketing. You've probably heard of the concept of the customer data platform, the CDP, and so on. That I think has had its own sort of Gartner sort of hype curve going on, and some sort of maybe trough of disillusionment on the way, and who knows. But in principle, this CDP concept is super far-reaching, right? Really what it represents is companies are starting to transition from being just systems or data is transitioning from being just data for workflow, and systems are transitioning from being systems of record to being systems of intelligence, right? And the whole idea there is then to be connected from the lens of what your goal is, which is, in our case, we are very focused on customer success. So whether it's acquisition, retention, prevention of churn, growth, etc., the customer is the center for everything we do. And so sort of the connectivity of data is massive. And then the building of toolboxes on top of that data is super impactful. I think that's probably the overarching trend from a data and AI standpoint. Within marketing in general, I think there is definitely a move towards better targeting in the anonymous realm. So when you talk about audience segmentation and when you talk about what channels resonate, sort of understanding the mind of the researcher when they haven't really revealed themselves to you, that I think is a big frontier. Content is a big frontier, at least for Salesforce, and I assume for a lot of folks, because I think what we've seen is that when marketing is successful, no one cares, things are good. But when marketing is not successful, a lot of the focus is on the channel. It's like SEM did not give me leads.
Right.
But really the focus should be what was the right message, whether the right message was given, whether that was the right audience to give the message to, and things of that sort. So when we talk about the right offer to the right person at the right time, I don't think the world has actually processed it from an execution perspective yet, and I think that is sort of the big transition that people are going to. Content tagging, content mapping, content being available for the right dimensions at any given point in time, content being processable for the various channels, etc. All of those are pretty massive initiatives, and I think those sorts of companies, I'm sure, are probably going to get more attention as we go along. And then I think at the overall level, like I said, the connectivity across various personas matters. Digital transformation is a buzzword, but it's true, right? It's like marketing should not just be getting a lead and moving on. Right. And sales should not just be getting the revenue and moving on.
Sure.
Right? It's the lifetime value that the customer brings,
right,
that each of these teams need to be responsible for. And so everything that all of them do needs to feed back to the next time they try to do the same thing, right? And that sort of digital transformation, having your data being customer-centric, being focused on customer success, etc. All of these things are very, very massive elements, at least in the B2B world. Not so much talking on the B2C side, which Salesforce is not too focused on.
Right.
And so point solutions sort of make some difference, but really the connections of those point solutions is where the meat and potatoes might be.
Great. Love it. Thank you for that. Okay, well, time to shift gears.
Yeah.
Thank you for all that. Some fun questions. What is your superpower?
What is my superpower? I'm not sure if I have any. I think, to me, I wouldn't talk about a superpower. I would talk about values a little bit. I think the key thing for me is just to be micro-ambitious and to be passionate about solving problems in an iterative and fast-fail sort of manner. So in other words, to keep moving the ball, to keep going forward. I think lots of times I've seen folks get focused on the strategy and the top-down view and really the big picture, the big goal. And in many cases, I think the solution is probably just to take a stance, go forward, see if it worked, keep going forward, and so on. And I think that's probably where business is evolving into very, very fast. We've done the basics. There is an online solution for everything. Do people have the mentality to then make 100 incremental improvements in what exists? to get to something that would then feel like a step change.
Right.
So my personal focus or value is to drive that way. So yeah.
That's
Yeah.
one of the longest answers I've ever heard.
Sorry.
Superpower. But I get where you're coming from. Okay, so when you think about work-life balance, is that possible? And if so, how do you manage that?
Oh, I think it's absolutely possible. In fact, work-life balance is a key priority for me personally, and also luckily for Salesforce as a company. So it works really well for all of us. I think it's possible where if you make it an objective, then your work will revolve around creation of work-life balance. So a simple piece is, if I automate my job, I have more time to be at home, right? And people may say automation takes jobs away and all that, but that's really a myth, because human brains are always going to be required. So what I focus on is, I have a certain set of responsibilities, and my goal is to do that work in enough time so I can actually have time at home. It is a priority, and I think at Salesforce family, definitely, you know, Salesforce is your family, but your personal family definitely comes first. And so the company itself prides itself on work-life balance, number one. But more so, I think the goal is to not let that sort of necessarily come at the cost of doing good work. Right?
Sure.
I think there can always be a good mix that can make a difference.
Got it. And I've been obsessed with getting in the state of flow recently.
Yeah.
How do you get in the state of flow, and when you do, what sort of tactics do you use to sort of, you know, get in that mindset? And when you can be hyper productive. Have you experienced that? And if so, what did you do to get in that state?
I haven't actively tried to do it, but I think one good way to do it is, if you knew what you wanted to accomplish. At least for me personally, what I've seen is there's the starting piece of it, which is always the biggest hurdle, right? You're to try to set your mind into solving that problem or doing that piece is the key piece. Once you get past it, it's sort of, to me personally at least, it just happens
Naturally, effortless.
It's just natural. For me, I think the better analogy is sports. Is like when you talk about the basketball player and all that, you know that over time, when they shoot, the ball's going to go in.
Right.
You know, and
Right.
You know it. Everyone knows it. The player knows it. The world knows it.
Right.
And really, it's because partly it's their preparation and practice from before, but partly also I think once they've crossed the basic hurdle and made their first shot and all that, they will start seeing better. They will start understanding the environment better and all that. So, like, to me, it's not something I necessarily try to focus on, but I do see it happens. And to your point, I think there will be days when you do come across at the end of the day and be like, hey, I've been ultra productive today.
Right.
And a lot of it is because you sort of zoned into that environment and you just sort of blazed through stuff, and at the end of it is like, you know, I built this amazing deck, or I solved this problem, or I sort of came up with a solution that was truly interesting, even though it was so it does happen. Yeah.
Last question.
Mm-hmm.
Undergrad, Stanford, MBA, Cal.
Mm-hmm.
When you go to the big game, who do you root for?
Well, I did my MS from Stanford, but yes, it's a fair question.
Okay.
I root for Stanford.
Okay.
That's a big reason for it was because that was where I went first, and I came there straight after my undergrad in India, and that's where some of my classmates and friends, they taught me what, you know, football was in the first place.
Sorry, MS at Stanford. That's what
MS at Stanford,
yes.
and I got taken to games, and I've been a fan of Stanford since then. And so I will not root against Cal, but I will root for Stanford.
There you go.
I don't go to the big game. I didn't go to Cal games when I was at Cal, but which eventually I do wear, you know, T-shirts for both of them. So it's all good.
All right. Well, thank you, Ajit, for being with us today.
Mm-hmm.
This is Center Stage. I'm Rajiv, your host. amazing, amazing interview today. Ajit Deshpande, Vice President, Marketing, Business, Planning, and Analytics at Salesforce. Signing off. Until next time, peace.